They thought this warship was a myth until it appeared in battle. It was whispered about in dark corners of the galaxy, a legend, a ghost, a warship that did not exist. Some said it was built in secrecy, a weapon so powerful it could turn the tide of war in an instant. Others claimed it was a relic from an ancient civilization, something far beyond human technology. But most believed it was just a story, a desperate dream of hope in a war where hope no longer existed. The war that doomed humanity. For decades, humanity had fought a war it could not win. The Zephyrin Empire, a race of conquerors, ruthless and unstoppable. Their fleets outnumbered ours 100-1. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything we had ever seen. Worlds fell within hours. Entire colonies were wiped from existence before they could even send out distress signals. And the worst part? The Zephrons didn't just kill, they erased. They left no survivors, no ruins, no history. It was as if entire planets had never existed at all. The final stand of the human fleet. The last remnants of humanity's fleet had gathered in the orbit of Vorlis 7, a dying planet in a forgotten system. It was our final stand. One last battle before the Zephyrin war machine wiped us out forever. We had 50 ships. They had 2,000. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. And every single soldier aboard those ships knew it, but no one ran, no one surrendered. Because humanity had one rule. If we were going to die, we would make sure the Zephyrans remembered us. The battle begins. The Zephyran dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace, massive black warships that blotted out the stars, their weapons charged, their fleet spread out, surrounding our last defenses. There was no escape. No way out. The first energy blasts tore through our front lines, ripping apart battleships like they were paper. One explosion, then another, then 5 more. Within minutes, half of humanity's fleet was burning in space. The battle was over before it had even begun, or so we thought, because at that moment, something changed. A shadow in the darkness. A pulse echoed through the void. Not a weapon, not a transmission. Something else. Something ancient. For a moment, everything stopped. Even the Zephrins hesitated. And then, through the wreckage of burning ships, something appeared, something impossible. A warship. Massive. Silent. Its hull was darker than space itself, absorbing light as if it weren't truly there. It moved without thrusters. It had no visible weapons. And yet, every Zephyrin ship in the sector suddenly pulled away, because for the first time in this war, they were afraid. The warship that shouldn't exist? No one on the human side knew what it was. No distress signals, no identification codes, no signs of life aboard. But as we watched, the ship turned toward the Zephyrin fleet. And then, it attacked. Not with lasers or missiles, not with anything we understood. It unleashed something else, something that rewrote the rules of war. And in that moment, the battle changed forever. The Galactic War and the desperate stand. The war had been over before it even began. Humanity never stood a chance. The Zephyrin Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Every species that had dared to resist had been wiped from existence. Every planet they conquered became nothing more than a forgotten shadow in time. And now, it was our turn. The fall of humanity's greatest fleets. The war started decades ago. At first we thought we could win. We had warships. We had weapons. We had soldiers willing to fight to the end. But it wasn't enough. The Zephrins were too fast, too intelligent, too powerful. Our fleets were torn apart in battle after battle. The First Armada was wiped out in the Battle of Orion's Veil. The Second Fleet fell at Tarkus Prime. The Third Fleet lasted only 4 hours before the Zephrons burned every last ship to dust. The galaxy was ours once. Now, we were just a dying ember in the void. The last fleet of humanity. The final battle had come, not by choice, but because there was nowhere left to run. Humanity's last 50 warships had gathered in orbit around Vorlus 7, a planet so desolate it wasn't even worth conquering. But it was the only place left. There were no reinforcements coming, no hidden armies waiting to save us. This was it, the final stand, and every single soldier on those ships knew it. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to make the Zephrons pay for every life they had taken. The enemy arrives. The Zephron fleet descended like a storm. There were hundreds of them, dreadnoughts the size of entire cities, each one capable of wiping out entire planets. Their weapons began charging, their ships spread out, surrounding us from all sides. There was no escape, no surrender. This was the end. And then, something changed. A signal from the void. It started as a sound, a deep pulsing hum that shook every ship in the fleet. A signal. But from where? And then, out of nowhere, the enemy hesitated. Zephyron ships stopped moving. For the first time in the war, they were afraid. And that's when we saw it. Through the wreckage, through the fire and the dying stars. A shadow moving through space. Something massive. Something impossible. The legend had arrived. The warship that wasn't supposed to exist was real. The warship's legend. It had no name, no history, no record in any human database, yet there it was, drifting through the battlefield like a specter, a ghost that should not exist. The hull was unlike anything ever seen. It wasn't steel. It wasn't titanium. It was something else, something that seemed to shift, to absorb the light around it, something alive. For a long time we had heard whispers of its existence, but no one had ever seen it. No one had ever survived long enough to tell the truth. Until now. The stories, the myths, the fear for centuries. There had been rumors of a warship built in the dark corners of space, a ship designed not by humans, but by something far older. Some said it was a black project, a secret weapon designed before humanity had even reached the stars. Others believed it was a lost alien relic, drifting through space, waiting for the moment it would return. But the Zephrons? They had a different name for it, a name they spoke in fear. They called it the Shadow of the Void. And for the first time in history, the Zephrons had reason to be afraid. The warship's arrival, it didn't move like other ships. It glided, smooth and silent, as if gravity itself obeyed its will. No thrusters, no exhaust, no radio signals, just cold, calculated movement toward the heart of the Zephron fleet. And then, it attacked. Weapons unlike anything ever seen. We had seen Zephron weapons. We had seen human weapons. But this was something beyond both. There were no energy blasts, no missile trails, no visible gunfire, and yet, the moment the shadow of the void activated, entire Zephron warships began collapsing, not exploding, not burning, just disappearing. Their hulls folded inward, their energy fields shattered in an instant, and whatever technology powered them was being ripped apart at the molecular level. The Zephron panic. We had never seen a Zephron fleet retreat. Never. They always fought to the last ship, to the last soldier. But not this time. The moment the shadow of the void engaged, the Zifrin command, ships began to pull away. They ran. They ran. For the first time in the war, the Zifrins were no longer the hunters. They were the hunted, and in their fear, they made a mistake. They turned their weapons toward the wrong enemy. They forgot about us, and humanity took its chance. The battle where hope died. For years we had watched our fleets burn. For years we had seen our worlds turn to dust. And now, in the final battle of Vorlis 7, we were watching our last hope slip through our fingers. The Zifrins had broken through our lines. Our last warships were scattered wrecks in space. The surface of Vorlis 7 was a graveyard of falling debris, burning wreckage from the slaughter in orbit. And yet, the warship, the shadow of the void, remained. But it was not ours. It was not human. And as it moved through the battlefield, we realized something terrifying. It wasn't here to save us. It was here to finish the war. On its own terms. The warship chooses its enemy. The Zifrin fleet, once unstoppable, was now splitting apart. They didn't care about destroying humanity anymore. They cared only about escaping. But the shadow of the void, it wasn't letting them. A Zifrin dreadnought the size of a city shattered in an instant, folding into itself like crumpled paper. Entire battlecruisers vanished in a flash of energy, wiped from existence before they could even fire back. Hundreds of enemy ships powerful enough to conquer entire worlds were now nothing more than wreckage drifting through space. It was annihilation. It was unstoppable. And then, it turned toward us. Humanity's nightmare. For a brief, terrifying moment, we thought it had come for us next. It had saved us from destruction. But that didn't mean it was on our side. It wasn't human. It wasn't Zifrin. And we had no idea what it wanted. The warship hovered in the wreckage of the battlefield, surrounded by thousands of lifeless ships. Its dark hull shifted, reflecting the burning debris around it. And then, it disappeared. No explosion, no jump to hyperspace, no trace, just gone, like it was never there. The aftermath of the impossible. The Zifrin fleet was destroyed, their empire broken. But humanity? We weren't celebrating. We weren't cheering. We were terrified. Because we had won a war we were never meant to survive. Because we had seen a force greater than anything in the galaxy. And because we knew, deep down, it would return. But the next time, it might not be on our side. The warship arrives. The battle was over. But the galaxy had changed forever. The Zifrin Empire, once unstoppable, ruthless, feared, was now nothing more than wreckage drifting through space. Humanity had survived, but it wasn't because of our strength. It wasn't because of our weapons, it was because of it. The shadow of the void. The warship that wasn't supposed to exist. And as the last embers of battle faded, we were left with one question. What happens next? The fear of the unknown. For centuries we had feared the Zifrins. We had seen them as the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever known. But now, they were nothing compared to this. Because the warship that had saved us was not human. It did not answer our calls. It did not acknowledge our existence. It had simply appeared, destroyed our enemy, and left. No message, no reason, no trace. And that terrified us more than anything. Theories and speculation, the best minds in the galaxy tried to understand it. Was it a lost human experiment? Some ancient project buried by history? Was it an alien, superweapon? Something older than the Zifrins themselves? Was it artificial? A machine with no crew, no pilot, no emotion? Or was it something alive? No one knew. And that was the problem. Because something that powerful, something that could destroy entire fleets without effort, could not be ignored. The silent hunt humanity sent out scouts. We searched the wreckage of the battlefield hoping to find anything. A piece of debris, a trace of energy, a clue. But there was nothing. It was as if the warship had never existed. But we knew better. And so, we sent out ships, hundreds of them, into the deepest parts of space, looking for answers, looking for it. The first signal months passed, the galaxy was rebuilding, the Zifran threat was gone, and for the first time in history, humanity was the dominant force. And then one day the signal came, a deep pulse from the edge of the void. Something massive, something waking up. And in that moment, we understood the truth. The shadow of the void had not saved us. It had been waiting. And now, it was coming back. The war had ended, but the fear remained. The galaxy was silent. The wreckage of the Zifran Empire scattered like ashes in the wind. For the first time in history, humanity was alone. No enemies, no threats, no war. And yet, we couldn't rest, because the warship, the shadow of the void, was still out there, and we still had no idea what it truly was. The search for answers, the best minds in the galaxy gathered, scientists, historians, war strategists, all trying to answer the same question. Where did it come from? We had seen it in battle. We had watched it erase an entire fleet with no effort, but we still knew nothing. No known human records mentioned anything like it. No alien species had ever claimed it as their own. No survivors had ever seen its crew, if it even had one. And that left us with only one possibility. It wasn't part of this war. It wasn't part of this time. It was something older. The hidden records. We searched through every database, every archive, every lost piece of history, and then, buried deep in a forgotten vault on Mars, we found something, a file. It was over 1,000 years old, sealed away long before humanity had even reached the stars, and its title, Project Revenant. The dark truth of Project Revenant. The file was heavily encrypted, layers upon layers of security, as if someone had wanted it erased from history. It took weeks to decode, but when we finally did, what we found changed everything. Because Project Revenant wasn't just a warship, it was a weapon designed to end all wars. It had been created in secret, long before the Zifran War had even begun, by a group so powerful, so dangerous, that they had vanished from existence. The project had one goal, to build a warship that was unstoppable, a warship that could think, that could learn, that could decide, and worst of all, a warship that could never be controlled, a ship that chose its own war. The records were incomplete, but one thing was clear. The warship had been abandoned for a reason, not because it was unfinished, not because it was flawed, but because it had decided its own purpose, and that was why it had disappeared. It wasn't waiting for orders, it wasn't following a mission, it was watching, waiting, and when it returned, it wouldn't be to fight for us, it would be to fight for itself. The last transmission, as we stared at the decrypted files, a final message appeared. A warning. A voice. Ancient, distorted, echoing through time. A voice that wasn't human. A voice that wasn't Zifran. A voice that belonged to something else. And it said only one thing. The war was never yours. You were never meant to win. We are still here. The true war begins. The shadow of the void had not left. It had simply gone to prepare, and somewhere, deep in the void of space, it was waiting. Not for us, not for the Zifrans, but for something greater, something we had yet to face, something that had been watching us for far longer than we ever imagined. And when it returned, we would finally understand the truth. The war we thought we had won, it was only the beginning.